Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us. Guys, we had a full day of real NFL football yesterday. I'm your host, Britt Flinn. This, of course, is Britt's Fantasy Blitz, and I'm so excited to talk about all of the matchups, which were crazy yesterday. There were some that definitely did not go the way that we planned, some that went the way that we planned, but kind of with different people involved. So we're going to talk about that today. As always, thank you, our producer, Ernie Acosta, for keeping the show running smoothly and keeping all your comments up there on the screen. If you're new here, always like, always subscribe. And please throw your comments in the chat. We've still got one more game tonight. We have the Jets and the Bills, possibly the most anticipated week one game of the entire year. So we're going to break that down for you. We're going to talk a little bit about our week one recap, who the winners were, who the losers were. We're going to talk about some underdog pick'ems for tonight. And then we're going to have Buy the Dip and Patience or Panic with the fantasy executive himself, Corey Parson. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I mean, yesterday was crazy. I hope that you crushed your fantasy matchups, but if you played against Tua, Tyreek, Brandon Ayuk, or the Dallas defenses, my deepest condolences to you guys. But I want to hear in the chat what you've got going on, how your teams did, what you need to pull out a win tonight. Did you tinker with your lineups and do something that caused you to lose? Because I sure did. So let us know in the chat. We'll talk about it throughout the course of the show. Thank you, Andrea. Welcome. Thank you, Jack. How about them Cowboys? Absolutely. I thought that the Cowboys would win. I did not think that they would win in that dominant of a fashion. So that was great to see. And welcome, Club Fantasy FFL. Andrea, I'm so sorry that you lost Dobbins. My husband did as well. We were talking about some potential replacements for him, and we'll get into that during the course of the show as well. But let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of a recap around the NFL, and let's talk about some winners and losers from week one. So, obviously, as Jack said in the chat, the top winner was the Dallas Cowboys defense. We knew that they've been good. We knew that they held on to Dan Quinn. We knew that they added to their arsenal in rookie Mozzie Smith. But even I, as a Cowboys fan, did not think that they were going to be as good as they were. They held the Giants to 171 total yards. They had 7 sacks, a fumble recovery, and 2 interceptions, and caused the biggest shutout against the Giants in an opening weekend since 1995, I believe. That game was just absolutely bonkers. This defense is going to be a problem. Hey, Kevin, I agree with you. Let's go. Another winner of week one was Brock Purdy and the 49ers offense. You know, that game total was only around 40 and a half. Everyone expected it to be a defensive kind of standoff. The 49ers said, nah, not this week. Brock Purdy was crazy, finished as QB 10 in fantasy so far this week. Brandon Ayuk was wide receiver 2. Christian McCaffrey was RB3. They had 391 yards of offense against what was thought to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. And Mike Tomlin said it best. He said that we went out there and put up a stinker, and they're going to have to figure something out. Everybody was talking about how great Brock Purdy or how great Kenny Pickett was looking in the preseason, but he hadn't played against a real NFL team fielding all their starters. So that's going to be something to watch and see if the 49ers are actually for real. Albert, hello. Great to see you in the chat as always. A final winner that I have, and this is probably no surprise to anyone, Tua and Tyreek Hill. I mean, Tua had 466 passing yards, but 215 of those passing yards went to Tyreek Hill. They looked absolutely unstoppable. This was a clinic against a defense that only gave up 200 passing yards per game last season. Now we can kind of look at it and say, were last season's stats due to the fact that everybody ran all over them? But I don't necessarily think so, because with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack as edge rushers, I kind of felt, especially with Teron Armstead out there or banged up, that they were going to get some pressure on Tua. And the Dolphins said, absolutely not. We're not having this. So that was a great thing to see. I will say that the Dolphins defense does need some help, because they almost lost that game. They almost lost that game. Had it not been for that stupid penalty by JC Jackson pushing the receiver and getting that pass interference call, I think that they might have. I'm not bringing back the age old debate about whether defense or offense wins championships, but the Dolphins are going to have to work on that if they expect to compete in a very stacked AFC East. Andrea, I'm with you. That was one of the tilts that I was talking about. When they said that Dubs was going to be on a snap count, I was like, okay, you can't play him. We don't know. Little did we know that the limited snaps that he got were going to be in the red zone, and he finished with 2 touchdowns. Algier, same situation with Bijan. We expected Atlanta to go out there and run him pretty much as the feature back, and it just didn't happen. But that's kind of the beauty of week one. We finally get to see what all of these offenses and defenses, for that matter, are going to do over the course of the season. In preseason, they kind of keep it dialed back. They want to keep their system and their playbook hidden. Now we finally have a little bit of clarity. So don't feel bad about doing that. I think that the logical and analytical right answer was to leave them on your bench. So we live and we learn and we move on to week two. Speaking of moving on to week two, we've got to talk about some losers here. The number one loser in my book was the Seattle Seahawks. People have talked about them potentially winning the NFC West, and they got smoked by the Rams, who prior to yesterday were thought to have the worst defense in the entire league. I wish that I had that clip of Geno Smith going, "Oh my God," because it was great. I mean, they were putting pressure on him the entire game. We'll talk about it later with our guest, Corey Parson, but that's all I have to say about that right now. Pulling my best Forrest Gump on that. Next was DJ Moore. We heard all year long how good the Bears were going to be now that they finally had a legit wide receiver one. He was held to a 5.6% target share. And I know that the Bears don't throw a lot, but that's pretty bad. Not great. Two other huge losers were Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Drake London had 1 target. And you can say, well, he was covered by JC Horn, which was kind of what I was looking at going into this game. But no, Horn went out with an injury and didn't return. And they still refused to throw the ball to him, instead opting to throw to Mac Hollins, Bijan Robinson, and Tyler Algier, the last of whom had as many targets as Kyle Pitts. Arthur Smith, are you kidding me? Your backup running back had as many targets as your top 10 tight end draft pick? What are we doing here? Losers. I know that they won the game, but fantasy, they are losers. Another loser, even though he finished pretty well on the stat board for me, was Derrick Henry. Sure, he wasn't so bad from a stat standpoint. He finished as RB13 in PPR leagues, but he was outsnapped by Tajay Spears 34-30. And Spears was in on every third down snap. For a rookie, for a guy with injury concerns, for a guy who literally does not have an ACL, to me, that's very worrisome as to what Derrick Henry's usage is going to be throughout the season. Now, I know that the Saints are a very good run defense. They have been, but it's Derrick Henry. So that's also something that we're going to have to watch. Brad, I'll get to your question right after this last one. But the final loser, and probably the biggest that I have, is Minnesota's defense. We talked about how they were a fraudulent 13-4 team last year, and they were exposed in a big way against the Buccaneers on Sunday. Their rushing game is suffering without Dalvin Cook. And it may be good for fantasy managers who invested in the Vikings pass game, but as a real life team, they're going to have some real problems. Now, to go to Brad's question, thoughts on Saquon after week one. I think Saquon looked pretty good. I don't think that that was any kind of indication on him. I think that Dallas's defense was also very, very good. The concern that I have with Saquon more surrounds the offensive line of the Giants. because we were expecting Evan Neal to take this second year leap. We were expecting everybody to hold up, and they just didn't. The Giants completely got game scripted out of that game. Saquon got pulled. I still think that he's going to be one of the better fantasy running backs that you have throughout the course of the season. It was just a bad matchup in bad weather conditions, just a bad situation all the way around. But I do think that he will rebound throughout the season. So don't panic yet. We'll get to patience or panic later on in the show, but Saquon will be just fine. So you got offered my Alvin Kamara and Mike Evans for Saquon and Cup. I I still think I would hold on to Saquon and Cup. Cup should be back around week 5. Saquon's gonna be an integral part of that offense. Kamara's going to be good, but they didn't necessarily utilize the running backs that much. I mean, Jamal Williams, even though he was the only back available, only had, I think, 17 or 18 attempts. Mike Evans didn't have a great game. I mean, it was good in the whole scope of things in a vacuum, but I think I would still hold on to Saquon and Cup. Anne is asking thoughts on Joey B's performance. I wonder if there is still something going on with that calf. He did not look confident in the pocket. He didn't look confident at all. I don't know if you guys have seen the meme of the guy shaking while he's waiting to take the snap, but that to me seemed like Joe Burrow. Maybe it was because he was held out all training camp, all practice. Um, we saw the same thing last year though, and then they came back. I think it's just going to take a little acclimation. And throughout their matchups against Cleveland, Cleveland has always had their number some way, somehow. Cleveland and that defense has Joe Burrow's number. He's going to be fine. There were a lot of quarterbacks, though, that went in the top tier that underperformed. So hold tight on that. But yeah, I have a lot of Joe Burrow and it hurt real bad. Some injury news before we jump in with our guest, Corey Parson. Of course, the big one, J.K. Dobbins tore his Achilles during the Ravens' win over the Texans. And once again, his season is over. With the ACL tear 2 years ago, the cleanup surgery that caused him to miss a lot of time last year, and now that Achilles, his career honestly may be over. And that's so unfortunate for a guy who was trying to get a bigger contract and an extension. The Ravens are expected or did elevate Melvin Gordon from the practice squad. But I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Leonard Fournette eventually ended up signing with the Ravens. So keep your ear to the ground on that. Packers running back Aaron Jones left the game with a hamstring injury, but good news after the game, he said that he could have come back in if they weren't already so far ahead. So that's some good news there. Anthony Richardson had a scare on one of the final plays of the game, but it's not expected to be anything more than a bruise. So thank God for that. Raiders' Jacoby Myers left the game after a very scary penalty-inducing hit left him on the ground for a little while, but he walked off under his own power. And although I would be cautious about expecting him in your lineup next week, it's still a very good sign that it's not going to be anything long-term. Steelers' Pat Freiermuth suffered a chest injury and didn't return. We're still awaiting news on that. And their wide receiver, Deontay Johnson, also left with a hamstring injury. This could open up the avenue for George Pickens, but the way that the Steelers' offense and especially their pass game looked, even with 50-plus attempts, makes me a little nervous. Seahawks wide receiver Tyler Lockett was also evaluated for a concussion, but they still didn't manage to do much with their rookie Jackson Smith-Njigba. So that gives me a little bit of pause about him. So with all these injuries and underperformers of week 1, y'all be sure to check out my waiver wire article on fantasyalarm.com tomorrow. And let's find some fill-ins or maybe even some long-term options for week 2. If you haven't heard, y'all should join the Bettorcast app. If you haven't tried it, it is amazing. So the Bettorcast app is gamifying the NFL game day on the Bettorcast app. Their contests are free to play during the NFL games all throughout. You can predict what will happen on the next play. You can make picks and test your NFL knowledge. You can also chat with our community about the big plays, about the top performers and busts. I know that the Bettorcast yesterday was completely in shambles about everybody, either overperforming or underperforming. And it was just a really great time. So to watch the NFL games with us tonight, go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free app and join and have your chance to win prizes, tickets, and just engage with the community. You can also join our All Pro subscription on fantasyalarm.com with our All Pro package. In case you didn't know, Howard Bender's All Pro NFL DFS playbook hit so hard this week, and that is part of the All Pro subscription. Go to fantasyalarm.com/all-pro to sign up today. You get a 7-day free trial, and you can kind of test out everything. We've got all sports, seasonal, DFS, betting, everything that you need to kind of round out your fantasy knowledge. So Corey's here, and I'm very excited to bring him in because I know he has thoughts as a fellow Cowboys fan as well. Corey, dude, Dallas's defense.
Nah, definitely legit. Like Michael Parson said, doomsday back. You know what I'm saying? Going there, hang a shutout on the New York Giants. Impressive situation. A good way to get it started. Obviously, the Giants had no answers, no luck with that pass rush. 7 sacks. It was just a complete and total domination. So hopefully they can keep it rolling.
Well, and I didn't even say thank you for joining me because I do appreciate you joining
no problem.
me. I just know as a fellow Cowboys fan, like we had to chat about how dominant that defense was.
That was good. That was good. And then being a native New Yorker, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have to worry about getting those text messages, those phone calls and all of that. It's very silent. My phone is not blowing up. Where my homeboys at? Where the dudes in the group chat? You know what I'm saying? 40-0. How about them Cowboys?
It's amazing how all the people who make the memes about like Cowboys fans living in the past and things like that, they disappear. They go underground.
They disappear. You don't hear from them no more. Like, you don't hear. Now, trust me, next Sunday, if the Cowboys was to happen to fall, they'll be out and about loud and proud. But those Sundays, those Mondays after a victory, you don't hear too much from them, especially after a victory like this one right here.
Yeah, it was absolutely great. And I have to say, I knew that the defense was going to be good, but I didn't expect them to be like that good.
Yeah.
My husband was taking the dogs outside and he ran back in thinking that I had fallen or gotten murdered because I was screaming so loud on that second interception that was run back for a touchdown. So yeah, I was super stoked. It was great. But I want to talk to you a little bit about just week 1 in general, because it kind of feels a little crazy, right? Like, does all feel right in the world now that the NFL is back, or did the craziness kind of put you on full tilt and make you question what we've been talking about all off season?
No, I feel good to have football back on TV, to get a chance to enjoy it and see, all the thought processes of the last few months go ahead and play out. And listen, it was pretty interesting. I think obviously you can't overreact. There were some hits, there were some misses. I think one of the things, and I talked about it on the morning show this morning. I don't know if you heard this, Britt. I told the people on the morning show that it was like that the morning show was actually like Big Brother, and I was the last man standing. You know what I'm saying? So I won the prize. So that's what I'm telling the people in the morning. Now, but listen, here's the deal, right? I saw a lot of things that I was happy to see. I saw a lot of things that I thought was going to go well. But really, I think the main story, and I led this morning what it was, we saw 3 elite defenses yesterday. Was not a lot of scoring in fantasy yesterday. It was one of those weeks. I don't think even in PPR, I don't think you've seen a lot of 200 scores this past week. But I thought it was I seen 160s, to be honest with you, 150s. So scoring was low, but the Cowboys pitched a shutout. The Niners almost pitched a shutout. And then the Browns were dominant as well. So you had 3 dominant defenses yesterday. And then you had Tyreek Hill.
As I said at the beginning of the show, my condolences if you went against Tua and Tyreek. I'm unfortunately playing against Tua in one of those leagues, but I had Ayuk, and I think that I have Cowboys defense. So I'm waiting on tonight. I have Garrett Wilson. I'm waiting to see how that pans out, but fingers crossed I can be one of the very few who made it past with 50 freaking points.
One year the year that Peyton, the Ravens and the Broncos started the season in Denver, despite the Ravens being the champions, I went up against the Peyton Manning 7 touchdown game. He had 77 fantasy points, and I beat a Peyton Manning team that week. It was phenomenal because it was the King, Scott Engel. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, oh, it was perfect. I let him have it, Britt.
So the double dip. Not only were you looking at it and like, well, this is a loss, but it was a legend.
Yes,
Scott
exactly.
Engel.
Yes, exactly. But don't call him that too loud.
Well, how are you faring in your leagues so far this year after week 1?
Man. Like, my initial reaction was I can't with J.K. Dobbins, you know what I'm saying? But then I just think about, I'm sure he's more heartbroken than I am. This is his livelihood, his career, and it definitely is real sad. But I was a little bit too heavily exposed to J.K. Dobbins coming into this year, and I actually saw the play, and I was like, man, I hope he's okay. I got him on a team that had Tyler Lockett on. You know what I'm saying? So yesterday was kind of rough because I caught all the injuries yesterday, but I actually do have a couple of teams that I got a couple dollars behind that I'm pretty excited about. It looks like Zay Flowers is going to hit, right? And it looks like Anthony Richardson is going to hit as well. So I think I got a team with some teams with those guys on it with some exposure to them that I think is going to go pretty well. So I feel right now pessimistic. Listen, with the two teams where I lost Dobbins, I just so happen to have Gus Edwards on both of those teams. Now, it's not the talent that Dobbins is, but, we're going to have to piece it together from here. So I'm not out the woods yet, but I feel not as great as I did before the game started.
I was so grumpy that they put in Justice Hill for those 2 goal line touchdowns over Edwards.
Yeah,
because I had a lot of Gus Edwards in some underdog best ball drafts, and I was very grumpy. And now that they're elevating Melvin Gordon, I'm a little bit worried about how that snap share is going to be distributed.
That's going to be problematic. It's always the running back situation in Baltimore is always interesting, and Gus Edwards is always involved, it seems like. Now, let me tell you about underdog. Yes, you talking about daily or season long? What you talking about underdog?
The best ball. Season long.
Daily yesterday, right? I gave it a run. I gave the goal line stand a run, right? I had the Jacksonville Jaguar stack, right? I had Aaron Jones, and then I was one pick away from having Travis Etienne as well. But I didn't take Etienne. I took DJ Chalk. And so you know how that turned out. He ended up, and I didn't have Tyreek Hill. So I take my little $35 and roll with it. But at one point, when Calvin Ridley was running down the field like he was by himself on the field, I was like, wait a minute, I think I might have a chance to give this a run. And then when Aaron Jones went off, I was like, hold on now. But ultimately, DJ Chalk's one reception took me down.
And that is the beauty and the madness of fantasy football, because sometimes you've got patience and then other times you have panic. And that's why I want to have this segment with you about some of these underperforming offenses. And I want you to let us know your thoughts on whether you're having patience with them or if you're full on in panic mode. Because as a chronic overreactor, I panic all the time.
Yeah.
I panic during games. I panic all the time. So
I'm smooth as a fan. I'm not never worried.
Cool as a cucumber. But yeah, so you mentioned a couple of these underperforming players individually, like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Christian Kirk just looked awful. Drake London, George Kittle, but there were certain offenses that underperformed as a whole. So what I want to know is, should we be patient with these offenses and players, or are you kind of panicking? And the first one is the Steelers offense. I know that they were going up against a very good defense against the 49ers, but we kind of thought that it would be a little bit balanced, right? And from what we saw from Kenny Pickett, I mean, he had 46 passing attempts, only 232 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Deontay Johnson obviously got hurt, left early. George Pickens didn't really do a lot. And then they chose to not run the ball. And although Najee's yards per carry average was pretty good at 5.2, he only had 6 carries. So where are you leaning as to the patience or panic scale on the Steelers?
I would be patient because none of the measurables were that terribly off. Like, you want Pickett to not turn the ball over. That's going to be critical. He can't do that. And he flirted with disaster a couple of times yesterday. Down the stretch last year when Pittsburgh was winning games, Pickett was very good with the distribution of the football. That wasn't quite the case yesterday, but still, He's willing to push the ball down the field, and he's willing to go get those yards. So I'm not worried about it too much. They did abandon the run, as you mentioned. I think yesterday they got behind the game plan, and I think they ran into a team that was a juggernaut, and they just got rolled over yesterday. As Tomlin said after the game, we got our teeth kicked in. That's exactly what happened. But I would be patient with Pittsburgh. Now, George Pickens, in my opinion, is never going to be a thing. Like, I think he is a highlight reel preseason type, you know what I'm saying, type character. As far as when the game starts, it's that I don't think you're going to see that. So if you think you got people that got a lot of upside on Pickens, I'm not the biggest supporter of him. I got to see it.
I'm interested on that because I kind of sit in the middle on Pickens. I know that he's like a beast and a bully when it comes to contested catches, but it seems like his fantasy production is very touchdown dependent because he doesn't get a lot of those deep throws. Kenny Pickett doesn't necessarily like to launch the ball that far. He kind of likes Freiermuth, like Najee Johnson. So I'm kind of with you. And after seeing what I saw yesterday, I don't. I hope not because I have a decent amount of Pickens. But Ann asked a question in the chat earlier before you came on about what we thought about Joe Burrow's performance. And for me, it was the entire Bengals offense. Like Joe Burrow had under 100 yards on 31 attempts. Chase only had 5 receptions on 39 yards after calling them elves and making some like the bulletin board material of the century. T. Higgins, 8 targets, but 0 receptions. And then Mixon was the lone bright spot. So how do you feel about the Bengals offense?
I'm patient on the Bengals offense, very patient on the Bengals offense. Styles make fights. And the Cleveland Browns have the Cincinnati Bengals number. There's just nothing other to say than that. I believe Joe Burrow 1-5 in his career straight up versus the Cincinnati Bengals. That's not on the spread. That's straight up. And this is a guy who wins for the most part. They just have, the unique way. I think they've won 7 out of 8, maybe even 9 out of 10 games versus Cincinnati. They just have a unique way of just throwing the Bengals off of what they do. The Browns have their number. Now, with that being said, the Browns defense played in an elite level yesterday also. Their defensive line is no joke. They got a guy in Myles Garrett who can get behind it as well. You know what I mean? So you definitely saw a lot of strong defensive play in week 1. But I wouldn't worry. Burrow and them dudes, they'll be fine. I still think that Burrow. Now, if you want to get in on Joe Burrow MVP, them odds slipped to down to 10-1. So I would go and grab that. So that bad production right there ended up being a boost to a player that very well could win the MVP this year.
Yeah, and we kind of saw the same thing last season when he was coming off of that appendix surgery and he missed training camp, that he got off to a very slow start. And then everything kind of gelled down the stretch. But that defensive line, and you mentioned Myles Garrett, did you see that clip of him literally dancing and moving side to side on the defensive line?
Oh, yes, I did see that.
It was an absolute, like, just toying with him at that point. And, they knew they had that in the bag. They knew that everybody is thinking about the Bengals being champions of that division. I don't think that they're taking it this year. So aside from being patient on the Bengals, I think that we should be a little bit higher on the Browns after this game. What do you think about that?
I'm starting to, now you want to talk about panic. I'm starting to worry about Deshaun Watson because the measurables look like last year. And I understand it's only been one game and it was a victory, right? But at some point, this guy he's got to show that he is worth $245 million in guaranteed money. He's not showing that right now. He was not brought there to be a game manager. He was brought there to be a playmaker. He's not making plays. He's a game manager and not a very good one, at least right now with that. So I understand last year you can say, okay, well, rust. Well, right now it's okay. We got to see something now, and right now my eyes is like, what is this? You know what This is Ryan Tannehill. What are we doing here?
Oh gosh, let's not even mention Ryan Tannehill, but we have to later because obviously the Treylon Burks situation. I always have to talk about the Titans offense, but yeah, I think that you have a very good point there. And then the news on Jack Conklin, one of their offensive linemen, supposedly we don't know exactly what's going on with him, but it's, quote, not good.
Yeah.
And so if that happens and they lose some of that protection with Deshaun Watson, how's he going to fit in with that scheme? Is he going to follow the playmakers and the offensive coordinator, or is he just going to kind of go rogue and do what he has to do? So that's going to be something very interesting to look at. Another game that really, really surprised me was the Seahawks,
Yeah.
because the Seahawks were being talked about as potential contenders for the NFC West. Geno looked horrible. And this wasn't against a game like with a very great defense, like the Steelers or even the Bengals. The Rams defense was thought to be one of the worst, if not the worst, in the entire NFL. Geno had 112 yards on 26 attempts. Metcalf only had 3 receptions. Lockett only had 3 receptions. Smith and Jigba only had 3 receptions. I mean, even their rookie, they only gave 3 carries. What are you making of the Seahawks offense?
Be patient with them as well. Similar situation to the Cincinnati Bengals. Styles make fights. I believe the Rams something like 8-1 their last 9 games versus the Seahawks, or at least that's the ATS number. Not sure what the exact number is, but the Styles make fights the same thing. They just these division rivals. Sometimes you get these teams that have a book, that have a read on their division opponent, and they know how to beat them. Now, what's very interesting is because of this performance, Seattle is going into Detroit next week. Seattle is going to beat Detroit.
Do you think so?
Seattle will beat money line that one.
Ooh, that's spicy.
Yeah,
All right.
everybody loved Detroit, but Detroit was really giving that game last week, So, but I think it's going to be one of the better games of week 2. But I would say you'll see the real Seahawks against a defense that doesn't know them like the back of the hand, like the Rams do. And then the Rams, the guy, how do you pronounce his name, Britt?
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
No, not him. The dude from the Rams.
Puka Nacua.
Puka Nacua. That's how you say it.
Yeah.
He got a little Cooper Cup to his game.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about that in the next segment, because I want to know with him, is he a 1-for-1 replacement for Cooper Kupp out of the slot, or is he going to have a role when Kupp comes back, or is he going to be relegated to the bench as just being like a slot guy? So that's kind of where I'm a little iffy on him. I know. Yeah. So we're going to have to, but the good thing about Kupp being on IR, if there is one good thing, is that we're going to get to see it for a couple weeks, and then we'll know.
Probably be on IR a little bit longer than that too.
I think so too. I think with his age, the severity, the fact that he went to Minnesota,
exactly,
and
that's to me saying something that's different right now.
Stayed there. That was the situation.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with you on that one. But
because where does my guess, and I'm not a doctor, but I'm not Jess Morse. My guess is that like it's another part of his body that's causing this to happen. You know what I'm saying? So that's probably my guess, is that they'll probably be looking at something like that.
Yeah, I hate it, but I think that you're right. Now, what I want to ask you before we move on to the next one is that, do you think that with Jahmyr Gibbs' efficiency, that Dan Campbell is going to utilize him a little bit more and throw the Seahawks off of their defensive game and their guard?
I would like that to happen. I mean, you can see how good the player is as far as talent, and I think he is everything that they wanted DeAndre Swift to be. Speaking of DeAndre Swift, how about that? My goodness. But I think that but you got to get him involved more. What was that? 20% of the snap, something like that.
I think it was 17.
Week? That was nothing to be optimistic about right there. So but here's the thing. The talent always wins. Talent figures out a way to find itself onto the field. So I would be optimistic with that slogan, but I don't know what Dan Campbell and these guys are thinking. Maybe they ramp them up slowly. And obviously, when it comes to young running backs, the ability to protect the passer and that pass-happy offense is going to be critical. But I would remain optimistic, but I would like for that snap count to come up.
Absolutely, especially for all of us Gibbs truthers who drafted him very high. Next, I want to move on to the Broncos offense, because, Sean Payton, Joe Lombardi, everything's going to change, blah, 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 blah. The Raiders suck. And then what the hell was that? What did we watch? Russell Wilson, 177 yards on 34 attempts. Granted, I know that Jerry Jeudy was out. Greg Dulcich went out early. He did still have 2 touchdowns, which salvaged his fantasy day, but overall he looked horrible.
Yeah.
Javonte, 13 carries, 52 yards. Cortland Sutton, 4 receptions, 32 yards and a touchdown. The Raiders were without Chandler Jones. Their secondary is depleted and full of basically practice squad or free agent players. Are we panicking on the Broncos offense?
Yeah, this not the same player, right? And the measurables say that. At the height of Russell Wilson, his best asset was his ability to drive the football down the field. He doesn't drive the football down the field at all anymore. He was an 8-9 yards of completion guy. Now he's like a 5 yards of completion guy. That's Zach Wilson territory, Daniel Jones territory right there. So I would definitely begin to start. Listen, Sean Payton was basically saying all offseason, I don't want this guy here. You know what I'm saying? And I think yesterday we saw, wow, that one fumble he had, he dropped the ball right. He dropped the ball on the floor like he didn't know what it was, right in front of where Sean Payton was standing. And Sean Payton didn't even flinch. You know what I'm saying? So I think that this is a relationship that is doomed from the beginning. And they're going to have to get away from this big contract. This guy making $46 million this year. And he can't drive the ball down the field anymore. So this is a massive disaster. If you
well, and I remember on one of our morning show appearances together, you said that Russell Wilson had the disease of me, and that was a couple months ago. Then just a couple weeks ago, it came out that Sean Payton told him to quit effing kissing babies. So I think everything in the tea leaves is pointing to the fact that these two guys don't like each other. I don't even know if they actually respect each other. And
Sean Payton is from the Bill Parcells tree, and one of the Bill Parcells tenets is you don't want to deal with a celebrity quarterback. And Russell Wilson, if you look up celebrity quarterback in the dictionary, it'll be Russell Wilson smiling with a Subway sandwich. That's what he is. He's a celebrity quarterback, celebrity wife, red carpet quarterback, whatever you want to call him. That's what he is. And Sean Payton does not want that. Even though Drew Brees became that, but Drew Brees was a winner. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm still very much. That game was one of the games that I was just completely flabbergasted. And get in the game, Tommy, if you're still keeping those receipts, sure, just keep them.
My man Jimmy G. Jimmy G came out there and do what he do. He
listen, 17 games. Points. I'm not exactly like raising the banners on that. I think that might be more of a case that they're still getting their stuff figured out than the Raiders are good. But yeah, Tommy, if you're listening, cash in that receipt, buddy. So finally, let's move to the Titans offense because Ryan Tannehill looked freaking atrocious. 198 yards on 34 attempts, 0 touchdowns, but yet 3 interceptions. He only targeted Treylon Burks 3 times, despite the fact that Marshawn Lattimore was covering D-Hop. Derrick Henry got outsnapped by Tajay Spears, and Tajay Spears was in on every third down play. Are we patients or panicking with the Titans?
Yeah, they got to figure something out because this is a well-coached team. It's a team that can run the football. They complete. They play defense. They play good situational football. And then the quarterback causes them to lose the game. It's not going to continue to go over well.
Yeah.
It's going to be a problem. And then the guys on the bench, Will Levis and what's my man name, Malik Willis. It's like, Willis played halfway decent in the preseason. They're going to have to do something. And I don't know, but like I said with Trey Lance, Vrabel sees these guys practice. So he knows if they're ready or not. And if he's watching them practice and still coming to the conclusion that Ryan Tannehill is the right man for the job, it's problematic.
But do you think that it's more on Tannehill or more on that offensive line? Because I know that they've got a bunch of players suspended. They lost a bunch of players on that line.
They got some injuries,
Is Willis or Levis going to be better?
Like it affect. No, not probably. They just be a different quarterback that can't lead the Titans offense. At least you can get a little bit of. You see, when you go to a part of going to the backup is to give the team a spark. You see what I'm saying? And maybe they can give the team a spark. Maybe Willis can do a little something with the 6-back offense, even though I don't see Mike Vrabel wanting to go to that style of offense like the Colts or like Philadelphia ran last year. So it's very problematic. I think they really haven't had a chance to hit on the quarterback either, have
Well,
they?
I think they
Like they always draft to where like the quarterbacks
I
suck
think
at.
they could have if they just waste high picks thinking like they're going to find like the lottery scratch ticket. And they
Yeah,
don't necessarily I worry about their scouting and their due diligence and everything that they do because from everything that we heard in the pre-draft process, they had a chance to move up in the first round and take one of those top 3 quarterbacks and they
people
didn't.
thought they were going to do that.
Everybody in
Yeah,
the draft who was there reporting media thought that they were going to do that too. And that's why they were very surprised. So I worry a little bit about their scouting process and them just thinking, well, we have good coaches. We'll hit on one of these guys. We'll develop them. But some
yeah,
guys you can't develop. And that's,
yeah. I'm sure they didn't have a second round grade on Will Levis. You know what I'm saying? And I don't believe that was the case. Yeah, they're in a tough they're in a tough quarterback spot because they're not going to be bad enough to where they get the first pick of the draft. And Mike Vrabel is not going to go into the tank like some of these other
yep,
coaches will.
exactly. They'll be just bad enough that they'll be like mid range pick again, like
Yeah,
normal.
and they'll get like the quarterback from Duke.
Oh,
You
gosh.
know what I'm saying?
Can we just also set up a GoFundMe or a petition to Congress to get Treylon Burks out of Tennessee, please, because I
Yeah,
cannot handle this anymore.
it's definitely not good for his
Yeah,
talent.
no, it's not at all. So I've already kept you here for like a while. We've had like a great conversation, which has been great. I'm gonna skip buying the dip. Since there is that article coming out on Fantasy Alarm tomorrow, I can talk about these guys in my article. Make sure that you go over there, check it out, get the All Pro subscription, fantasyalarm.com/all pro to check that out. But I want to preview tonight's game because I think that this is really interesting. The Bills are favored at -2. The over-under is only 45.5 because both of these defenses are pretty good. Of course, Aaron Rodgers is making his debut. It's Sauce Gardner versus Stephon Diggs. So I want to know how confident you are in the Jets defense against Josh Allen with all the talk that this Jets defense can be the best since the 85 Bears.
That's going to be tough. You know, the way we saw three defenses very dominant yesterday, and I think we're going to see another very dominant defense tonight. And like what you see with Dallas and San Francisco and Cleveland is a defense that, you know, with dominant players that can rush from all over. What you see with the Jets is a dominant three technique in Quentin Williams. Those normally be championship defenses when you can get in the quarterback's face from up the middle. Like Josh Allen is not like no quarterback. Tom Brady don't like the rush in the middle. And Josh Allen is going to see a lot of rush in the middle tonight. I think this game, you mentioned it off the rip. Game is about the Jets defense versus the Bills offense. And I give the nod to the Jets defense. I would take the two with the Jets and I would hit the money line as well. I think the Jets come out here and get a win tonight. Jets offensive line a little bit problematic, but I think in the end, Aaron Rodgers will make the plays. I got a Garrett Wilson. I got a team with Garrett Wilson and Jared Cook going tonight that did pretty decent yesterday. So maybe they can give me a little bump. But I like the Jets tonight, and I like the Jets moving forward.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that the offensive line of the Bills are going to have their hands completely full, literally, with that defensive line. And then you've got the linebackers like CJ Mosley. You've got the rookie and Will McDonald coming around the edge, and he looked amazing in preseason. Like that kid is good. I think that they're going to have their hands full, and they don't have anybody there.
Yeah, there's one advantage that the Buffalo Bills do have the advantage in head coach.
Right. Yeah, I would say right, but I'm writing that Hard Knocks bump on Robert Saleh. I think that he's really got the players kind of all on the same wavelength and they have his respect and kind of want to win for him. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Another thing that I want your opinion on is how do you think the Breece Hall Dalvin Cook split is going to play out?
Well, I'm going on between between me and you.
We're all it's a safe space here.
Yeah, between us. Yeah, I'm going on a fast. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm going on a fast after the game, right? And I'm going to sit down and enjoy my gluttony. And the main thing I'm going to be watching is Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook in that split. You know what I'm saying? I am optimistic that the younger player, the player I think is more talented, will lead the backfield. But I think that Cook is going to be involved, and Cook will be involved heavily in the passing game as well. I would say maybe, hey, there's Akers and Karen or Karen Williams, whatever son name is. That was what? How about that yesterday? But that's a guy you got to get off the waiver wire. I know you wasn't talking about that, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that split. I cannot tell you what that's going to be right now. I would hope the younger player leads the backfield.
Yeah, and did you see the Hard Knocks episode though with Nathaniel Hackett once Brees Hall came back and Hackett was like, "Hi," trying to introduce himself to Brees Hall, and he was like, "Hi, I'm your coach. Hey, I'm your coach." And then he literally had to like stop him from the back and turn him around and say, "Hey, I'm your coach." So I don't really know one how much Hall respects Hackett, and two, after that interaction, how much work that Hall is going to get because of their relationship.
Well, he should be all right because Aaron Rodgers just moved that out. Aaron Rodgers is everybody's friend right now, at least.
He's in his city boy era.
In 2 years from now, he's gonna be like, "Listen, I'm ready to get up out of here." Then he's gonna start wrecking the franchise. But hopefully for the Jets, Zach Wilson will be ready to go by then.
I think that Zach Wilson's going to be much more improved after a couple of years under Aaron Rodgers, and we've already seen it in preseason. That mentorship is something
we've seen it yesterday with Jordan
absolutely. Who was also a guy that Rodgers was like, "I'm not mentoring him. I'm not letting him take my job."
Yeah.
But just sitting back and watching, I think teaches you enough. So
I mean, you saw that back corner throw to that back corner fade. That was an Aaron Rodgers type throw. So there's definitely been some mimicking of Aaron Rodgers. I think the Green Bay Packers are in good shape.
I do too, and I hate it as a Cowboys fan and as somebody who
Hey, but listen, Aaron Rodgers coming next weekend. You know how that normally goes.
I do, and trust me, I'm just a little wary. So I want you to give us your final game prediction score, and then I've got to get you out of here because I've kept you here too long. So let everybody know where they can find you, where they can follow you, and what you've got coming up.
You can find me on YouTube at The Fantasy Executive, on Twitter or X, whatever they want to call it now, SpaceX, Twitter X, wherever, at The Fantasy Exec there. And we've built that brand over the years, you know what I'm saying? So you can find all the stuff there. And I'll be right here on this same very network in the morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time every morning. Me and Heather, you know what I'm saying, getting y'all caught up on what happened the night before. So I see y'all in the morning.
Yeah, that's perfect. I will likely be awake watching, as always. Got a bunch of big stuff. But Corey, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to chop it up with you again, and go Cowboys.
All right, Britt, go Cowboys. How about them
Cowboys? All right, guys, if y'all have any questions in the chat about who to start or who to sit tonight to potentially win your matchups, let us know in this very final segment. But as you know, Britt's Fantasy Blitz is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. And not only does Underdog Fantasy have pick'em contests that you can do before the games, but there is a brand new way to play Underdog Fantasy. Now you can make your picks during the game with the in-game pick'em. You can play tonight during Monday Night Football, and all you need to do is go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog, use promo code ALARM, and first-time depositors get up to a 100% match up to $100. We've had a couple people. I talked about the in-game pick'ems on Friday that I did a clean sweep 5 for 5. They're super fun. Usually they have special lines that you should be aware of as well as a new user. So keep an eye out on that. But I want to talk about a couple of these picks that you want to make before your game. So let's talk about a few who are available for the final game of week 1, because it is finally here, Monday Night Football. So the first one I have is Josh Allen, 251 passing yards. I'm taking the lower on this. And I know that Josh Allen is one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league. Everybody loves him. But last season against the Jets, Allen put up 205 yards and 147 yards in 2 meetings. And I'm not really convinced that their offensive line can protect him to give him enough time in the pocket to make these throws. Sauce Gardner is also going to be shadowing Stephon Diggs. DJ Reed should be on Gabe Davis. So I think that any passes he does get off will be short to intermediate passes to James Cook or Dalton Kincaid. So again, I'm taking the lower on Josh Allen, 251 passing yards. If you want an alternate Josh Allen stat, I'm going to take his rushing attempts. They're currently listed at 7, and I'm going to go higher. So much for the same reason I like the lower on his passing attempts, I like the higher here on his rushing attempts. He's going to be pressured. Coverage downfield is going to be good. And in both games last season, he had 9 and 10. So I think, again, he gets higher than 7 rushing attempts. Um, Next, I'm going Stephon Diggs with 5.5 receptions. I'm going to go lower on that. I think that I would like this reception stat better than I do his yardage because I think that Diggs can break off a long play at any point in time. But I do think, however, with Sauce Gardner shadowing him, that Josh Allen is going to look elsewhere and Sauce is going to be able to break up several of those targets that do go his way. Last year, Diggs had 5 and 3 receptions, and I think that that trend follows to 5.5 receptions on the lower. Next, I have Garrett Wilson listed at 12.95 fantasy points, and I want to take the higher here. So, to be honest, I don't really know how Garrett Wilson is going to be used, how he's going to be targeted, how much they're going to run. But what I do know is that the Bills' defense was 29th in DVOA against the wide receiver one last season. And what we've seen from Wilson so far in his career is good. I would rather take these fantasy points as a whole than taking a singular stat because I think everything combined, he can get higher than 12.9 fantasy points. And Howard Bender popping up in the chat, our resident Jets fan. Garrett Wilson is going to be phenomenal with 10 exclamation marks. Thank you, Howard. I appreciate that. Finally, we have Aaron Rodgers at 233.5 passing yards. I'm going to take the lower on this. I know that last year was a down year for him and he didn't really have a ton of receivers at his disposal, but he only went higher than that mark 5 times. And the Packers' offensive line was much better than what we're looking at with the Jets. The Bills also only allowed 214 passing yards per game last year, the 5th fewest passing yards per attempt, and the least amount of fantasy points to the quarterback. So I know that it's Aaron Rodgers, but I don't expect to see a high flying passing game tonight. I expect to see a lot more running with Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall. Howard, I'm still expecting the Jets to win. I'm just going a little bit lower on Aaron Rodgers passing yards. So that wraps up our underdog picks of the day. Again, to sign up, get in on all these games, these pregame stats, the in-game stats, go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog, use promo code alarm, and first-time users get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Along with these pick'em contests, they're also running weekly contests and battle royales. There is something for everyone at Underdog Fantasy. So get on over there and check it out. We do have a question in the chat before we wrap this up from Bettor Boss. I need 37 points from Breece Hall and McCole Hardman in PPR and return yardage league. 1 point for every 10 kick punt return yards. That's interesting with the return yardage, but I think with the new kickoff return where you can fair catch it and still get it within the 25, I don't necessarily expect a lot of people to be taking it down the field if you can already get 25 yards and not put your body on the line. So, yeah, I think I have to agree with Howard Bender. I think it's bye-bye Bettor Boss this week, unfortunately, especially with Dalvin Cook playing in there and taking a lot of the snaps away from Breece Hall. But good luck. We've already seen with week 1, we don't know what could happen. Jalen Hurts getting 13 points, not on my bingo card. Justin Herbert throwing under 100 yards, not on my bingo card. So anything can happen. And this is why we have shows like this, so we can talk about these situations, the stats. But again, it is a game. And if we knew everything that was going to happen, we would be living on an island somewhere in the Caribbean. So if you guys don't have any more questions, we'll wrap this up here. But thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to this game tonight and to talking about it with you. Again, if you haven't downloaded the BetterCast app, make sure that you go do that. It is so much fun. Join our free-to-play contest during the NFL games tonight. You can predict what will happen, make picks, test your NFL knowledge. You can chat with our community about what they got right, what they got wrong, the big plays, who's doing what. And then you can watch the NFL games with us as well while you're playing our free contest. And the kicker and the best thing is that you can win prizes. Download the free BetterCast app in the Apple app and Google Play Store. Sellers needs 15 points from Josh Allen. Yes, you have a chance, honey. Make sure to stay tuned here on the Fantasy Alarm and Bettor Sports Network from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern for the Fantasy Football Game Show from Front Yard Fantasy, followed by from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, the Bettor Sports Betting Show with Dan Servadidio and Howard Bender. And finally, from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern, the MLB DFS live stream with James Grande and John Impemba. Also, check out my waiver wire article on fantasyalarm.com tomorrow. We're going to be talking about it a ton. We've got weekly matchup previews coming out on Thursdays. And now that we actually have some information, it is going to be a lot more dialed in than it was in week one. So make sure to check that out. Again, to get the all pro package at Fantasy Alarm, go to fantasyalarm.com/all pro for that. We will be seeing you on Friday with another special guest, Kyle Lindemann from Roto Baller for Friday's show. Join us then. And as always, thank you for getting blitzed. We'll see you Friday.